Stoked. All right. Hey, what's going on, guys? I want to welcome you to another Smart Music Business podcast interview. And I've got a really special guest today, my man, Jordan from Hardcore Music Studio. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely, man. So stoked that we just know some similar people and similar friends and kid connection, a lot of cool stuff.
In the same class, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? So dude, I want to just get right into it because you're known for mixing hardcore records, but for the people that are just joining us and might not know the difference, can you please explain what the difference is between mixing and mastering?
Yeah, totally. So so mixing is a lot more detailed. It's a lot more in depth. It's man, how can I explain it in a metaphor? Maybe like, let's say if you were drawing, like sketching something and then painting it and coloring it all in, like that's like the mixing part. Whereas like just laminating the picture would be the mastering part, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And normally, but the picture is the most important part, right?
Yeah, of course. If you have a garbage painting or a garbage drawing and then laminate it, doesn't make the drawing any better, right?
Yeah, it's like seals it off, right?
Exactly.
But don't you find in this industry people get like, oh, it's not mastered yet. It'll sound better once it's mastered. Is that kind of like a myth or a debunk? Where's that come from? Because I've never heard a song get better really once it's mastered. At least not that much.
No, mastering should be the last 5%, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a myth. Like, yeah, the master should only make your mix just a little more of what it already is, just like a slightly better version of what it is, a little louder, sometimes a little more intense. And the mastering engineer can maybe fix some small problems, but they shouldn't be really changing the sound of your mix in a big way at all. That's kind of a poor mastering job, I think.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like you can't polish a turd kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like you can make something, you can shine it up, bring the levels up, but if it's not mixed, then that's the problem. Like I would rather, release a song that's mixed, but I could never release, or sorry, what am I trying to say here? I couldn't release a song that's not mixed, but I could release a song that's not mastered.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. That's an awesome way to put it.
Right. So tell my audience how you got into this, maybe a little bit about your story. I have some questions about who you've worked with and stuff like that, but maybe share how you got into this in the history of how you got started and what you do.
Yeah, it kind of took me by surprise. Just all through high school, I was playing in punk bands, metal bands, and we actually had a friend who was in college for recording arts. And one of his projects, he had to record a band start to finish and finish it, mix it off and all that stuff. And for that project, he brought in my high school bands into the studio to record. And I had always thought that I wanted to be kind of like a rock star, like touring, playing on stage in bands and stuff. That was always my dream. But I remember that first time we went into the studio, it was almost like as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh, this is home. Like, this is where I belong, And
yeah,
from that point forward, that kind of started my love of it. And it was just in my mind from that day on. And from that point forward, every time my band went into record, I was constantly like, for one thing, really watching what was happening. And for another thing, I was constantly frustrated by the results. I kept thinking like, the engineer's making the wrong choice here, or I wish this sounded different, or I think if I had the opportunity to mix these tracks, I think I would do a better job. I mean, that was a little bit misguided because I didn't know anything, but at the time, that's what I thought. I just thought I need to be doing this. So yeah, that's how I started.
That's so crazy, dude. I can remember being so frustrated coming out of the studio. Like you work on something and then you do the car test and you play it, and I'm just like,
yeah,
this is terrible. And part of it was the mix, and part of it was just the songwriting, and a lot of it was the producer and mixer. And this was just specifically, I remember one guy, and I would never drop his name, but some producers just couldn't give me what I wanted, where others, I noticed actually the better producers, they wouldn't actually even let it leave until it had reached a certain state where some of the other guys like, yeah, I'll bounce a mix with you to live with it. And man, I would live with it, and I'd be like, heck, man, we gotta fix this, we gotta fix that, and just, and definitely didn't have the ears for it. But like, how did you get into the fine tuning and stuff? Like, I could be like, just the drums don't sound right, or the vocals just not in the pocket, bro. Like, there's a difference between the vocal just being too loud, or like you can tell someone to adjust volumes. Okay, that's fine. Most guitarists that are mixers, they like to go heavy on the guitar. Most drummers who are mixers like to go heavy on drums. So it all depends where the producer comes from. But like, more than that, like getting things in the pocket, like I don't even understand that, right? Like I can say there's just something not right, bro. You got to fix it,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a journey. Like I said, I thought that all I needed to do was be the one behind the faders, and like I would be able to get the balance right and better than other people. And I quickly learned, like when I started, I knew nothing. I just started recording my own bands. And it just, like you're saying, it just wasn't right. I was like, okay, like what is wrong here? And at first it was kind of fun, and I was just messing around, but then it gets frustrating because again and again, you're taking it to the car or putting it up against other records, and it's just nowhere close. Right. It gets super frustrating. So yeah, from there, it's like, man, there's just so much to it. It's so much more than just balancing faders or turning the pan to the left or right. Like there's layers of, I don't know how technical you want to get, but there's EQ and compression, and like so much of that being in the pocket has to do with that. It's blending the different frequencies together, and controlling the dynamics, like the difference between the loud and the soft parts, like limiting that to the right degree so that things stay up front. And yeah, there's so much depth to it.
Yeah. Like I remember when I worked with I was really spoiled with my buddy Adam Messenger for a really long time, who's done stuff with like Bieber and Magic, some of the, biggest pop artists out there. And I was spoiled with his mixes. And I remember starting to work with other people because I love working with new people and stuff like that. And I'm really blessed now to work with lots of new people. But I remember specifically when I started to work with someone else other than him, and I'd be like, this doesn't sound like his mix, and it would frustrate me. And I'd be like, what do I tell him, dude? Like, what do I tell you? He's like, it's in the editing, man, the editing. He's like, he's not spending enough time. Like, I guess he said something about lining everything up to the point so it is so clean. Yes. Is there a lot of truth in that? Like whether it's drums, guitars, vocals?
Oh yeah, that's the huge thing that I talk about over and over again in my YouTube videos and programs and stuff. It's because it's the same thing. Like that's the issue people have. A lot of times it's not like a mastering problem. It's not often sometimes a mixing problem. It's like a performance and editing problem. So like you said, you can't polish a turd. So like step one is the mix can only be as good as the raw tracks are. So you've got to make sure you have tight performances, really good performances. That's step one. But then step two, any issues that there are with that, whether it's maybe vocal layers being slightly off time, or drums being slightly off time or rushed or late or whatever, you've got to clean that up in editing, because a lot of musicians just can't get it that far. And to be fair to them, it's like the standard of pro music now, I think, because genres went a little more electronic, the regular person is just used to hearing drums that are completely on the grid and on the click, right? We're used to that, and we're used to like quote perfection almost with pitch and everything. And so it's very hard. Like I've worked with a lot of artists, a lot of musicians who I would consider really great, and there's almost no one that can get away with not tuning the vocals or not editing the drums. So yeah, that stuff all has to be tight, and that goes a long way to getting a good mix too. Half the time my students, they'll send me a mix to review and say, hey, give me feedback on the mix. I'll be like, dude, like we shouldn't even talk about the mix. Like the drums are off time, the vocals aren't tuned. You got to fix that first, because it doesn't matter what you do in the mix.
That's so good, man. Oh my gosh, that's so good. And like I don't really handle, like I'm very just much in the songwriting, getting the song right, get my performance, and then it's like send it off. Like, and I know one of my buddies, he just sends his vocals off to one guy who does all the tuning. Mm-hmm. And they just get them all tuned for him, and then he sends them back, and then he does the mix once it's all tuned, because that's even an art form in itself. Yeah. As far as I don't know what people use. I've heard, and I don't do this right, but I've heard of like Melodyne or I don't know.
Melodyne, Auto-Tune. There's a bunch now.
Auto-tune. Yeah. I'll never forget in the studio for my song Human, which was one of the most painful songs to record because the producer was stretching me and he had auto-tune turned on while I was singing.
Mm.
And I guess that's what a lot of times they did in LA and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, bro, this is like, he's like, no, it'll help you find the note. And I'm like, okay, but it turned out to be a good song. So what do I know?
Did you
Um,
find that actually helped you, or was that harder to perform?
it was harder at the time, but then I got used to it, right? But what's funny is, and when I was younger, I used to always memorize my lyrics before going to the studio. And now I never memorize them because I don't want them to get stuck if we change them or edit it. And then I got that muscle memory is messing me up.
Mhm.
And I'm obviously more seasoned now, and I can, I know how to change pitch, different things, and just more comfortable. But then it was like when someone's trying to tell me to do something different, it was just like, I couldn't, I wasn't getting it, and then finally it's like, oh, this is what you want me to do.
Mhm.
Right. And so, yeah, it's just like a learning thing. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if we kind of answered this or not, but what is one of the big aha moments that helped you get like vocals sounding amazing in the mix, or just like anything where you can remember where it was just like, like breakthrough, whether you watched a YouTube video, someone taught you, or you just stumbled upon it yourself, or it was just like, boom, like breakthrough, like next level in getting your mixes better and stuff.
For vocals specifically, I can't remember a specific moment, but there's definitely specific techniques, I guess you could say. So getting the tuning right, I think was a big thing. Once I invested the money into, auto tune or Melodyne, started doing that on every session. That was a huge improvement. And then on the mixing side, it was probably compression. So like that is a mixing technique that is probably like 80% of the mainstream vocal sound, like lead vocal sound, that's like kind of right up in your face, intense, kind of upfront the whole time. Yeah, 80% of that sound is just like compression, and like lots of it, and not being shy to just really slam it.
Yeah. And what that takes the rawness away from it. Like when you say compression, that includes, is that an EQ, or that includes like EQ, or
No, so that's like, so what the compressor will do is it will turn down the louder parts and then bring up the quieter parts.
I
So
see.
that's why if you're singing quieter in a verse versus a chorus, like it'll level that off to a certain degree.
Oh, okay.
So that's one half of it where, yeah, it's going to make sure you can actually hear every word properly and keep it more upfront and won't get lost in the mix as much. But then if you really compress it even more, it's like you like take that to the nth degree, where it's like almost all the noises of like of the mouth of and breaths and stuff of the singer, right? And all
Yeah.
that character and the way that they hit like consonants, like like C's and T's and stuff, and like you can time it with the compressors that those actually hit harder, and it makes the person sound like they're actually singing like twice as hard as they actually were. So it's pretty, yeah, it's a little in the weeds there technically, but it's a super powerful tool for vocals.
I love it, man. And it's simple, right? But it's just like, do it. Grab the
Yep.
grab the templates or whatever they are, and just put those on your vocals and stuff, right?
Yep.
So, I have a question. You mixed one of my favorite bands back in the day called Emery. I think when we were hanging out, I was sharing one of my favorite metal bands or their records was The Question.
Yeah.
And when I was with Tooth and Nail Records a really long time ago, that's how I got introduced to them and stuff. And when I was looking on your stuff, I was like, oh, dang, dude, you mixed Emery. Can you share how that came about, and also how you get gigs, like how you get gigs as a mixer?
Yeah. So in terms of Emery, it was a long time coming. It was, man, probably almost 10 years ago or more than 10 years ago. I had been using the mastering engineer. His name was Troy, and he had mastered a ton of Tooth and Nail records. I mean, maybe he's done one of yours. And I was looking for a mastering engineer to send my stuff to. And so I was looking on the back of all these Tooth and Nail records because those are all my favorite bands at the time. And his name was always on as a mastering engineer. So I started sending all my mixes to him for mastering. And a couple of years into that, maybe 2-3 years into that, we'd worked together a bunch. I had improved. I was like, man, I know Troy works with Tooth and Nail a lot. Like, I'd love to work on some of their bands. Like, I'm just going to ask him, like,
Yeah.
so I asked like, hey dude, if you feel comfortable in my work and everything, I'd love like an intro to someone at the label. And he was cool with that at that point. He's like, yeah, I trust your mixes. You know, I would feel comfortable recommending you. So yeah, he introed me to one of the guys at the label. And then it takes patience, man, because it was probably a year from that intro until I actually got a mix project
Oh,
from him
wow.
for a Tooth and Nail band. So just staying in touch over a year. And then after that went well. So then after that, I think Emery was looking for a mixer. This was back like 2014 or something, and it actually didn't work out. So I had to say no to the project because I was like moving and I was traveling to Europe for like 3 weeks, and I literally just could not do it. I could not fit in my schedule. I was so bummed. So I had to say no to the first opportunity. And then, yeah, dude, it was like, I started listening to their podcasts, and I had their email address at that point. So
Yeah.
I would just email one of the guys in the band, you know, here and there, just, hey man, are you working on any music? What's up? You know, just super casual. And then finally one of the emails I sent, it was like just at the right time. And it was just like, yeah, dude, we actually need help with something right now. So we got on the phone, one thing led to another, and eventually I'm mixing the record. So
That's so cool.
maybe that helps answer both questions. Patience, persistence, and actually just sometimes you have to ask. Like, I think that's something people, they just wait. They think they can just get good at something and then just wait for stuff to come to them. It's
Yeah.
like, no, man, like you got to take action. You have to actually put yourself out there on the line and be like, hey, can I work with you? Like
Yeah.
that's important. Yeah.
Dude, I'm so glad you like
Yeah.
emphasize that. We got to close the deal, man.
Yeah.
Like, and your patience with that. Like it was years of you mixing,
Mhm.
building the relationship. Like, sometimes people will hire me or, want to work with me. And like, that's just like the start of the relationship, right? To get into those networks or those connections and stuff like that and build that relationship. And then eventually you go for the ask. But there's just so much power in partnership. But like, you got to know when to ask, right? Like
Yep.
when to be cool. Like one guy was in my program, and it was funny. He like asked to cancel, and at the same time, hey, would you be willing to promote my stuff later? While he's like canceling something, I'm just like, dude, you don't get it. Like you don't get it, bro. You don't get it. But
Yeah.
like, I love how you hired the guy, so you're
Yeah.
giving him money, showing him you're a pro, worked for a while, like sewed into that relationship. Then you did an ask.
Yeah.
Then even after that, it's like I think it was Russell Brunson who was saying he campaigned Tony Robbins for years. Like he did certain things to build the relationship and then finally got in. And this is one thing I teach my students is campaigning, like campaigning a radio station. You're campaigning artists you want to work with. Maybe you're buying their VIP packages or something, or going to their show and sending a mix, or I don't know, like just whatever it takes to get in front of whoever you want to work with, right?
Yes.
Like like I love that. And you ended up getting like a dream artist, like, and it happened,
Yep.
right? Like that's bonkers to me, man. And I love that. Uh,
Yeah. There's like multiple, probably a lot of like the bigger credits on my discography. Like I can trace it back to one of those moments where, like you said, there was some relationship built beforehand, or maybe I had hired them for something or hired someone they knew or something, and that kind of got me into a circle. But yeah, at some point there had to be an ask. There had to be putting myself out there. So yeah, I
yeah.
totally agree with all that, man.
And they might just say yes.
Exactly.
Like they might just say yes.
Yeah.
Like I can't tell you how many times I emailed a radio station or emailed whatever. Actually, last week, the radio promoter asked me to email the radio station and say, hey, like, do you think you could take this song from medium rotation and throw it into heavy, because we're trying to get the number one and we just needed a few more spins. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll email the guy. And so, coming from the artist, sometimes that's cool. And so I did it. And he responded. He's like, yeah, dude, for sure. And so we jumped up from number 3 to number 2, and we were one spin away from number 1. Which is funny. And but like if I didn't ask, I wouldn't have, right? And the Bible talks about that. You have not because you ask not.
Yep.
All you
Yeah.
artists, sorry, you go.
Yeah, I was just saying, I see that all the time, especially with the aspiring engineers and producers I work with, and they want to work with more clients and stuff, right? And we'll have conversations, and they'll say like, "Oh, well, I sent this band an email, like, and then they didn't respond." I'd be like, "Well, how long has it been?" They'd be like, "Oh, it was like 6 months ago." It's like, well,
Oh
you haven't
man.
followed up. Like, come on. Like so much of this is just timing. And with that
Yeah.
Emery story, like, yeah, there's again, over the course of over 5 years, emailing that, checking in what's going on, and sometimes no response. But again,
Yeah.
like I said, it's just timing. It was like, if you stay top of mind and you happen to hit them at the right time when they actually need what you're offering,
Yeah.
then boom, something can happen. But if you're not actually trying, then you're not in the game at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
And specifically on mixing, I remember my song House of Cards is a pretty metal record, guitar solo. And I remember the mix wasn't where I wanted it to be. And so we had a bunch of people mix it. I remember some guys would even like do a mix for free
Yeah.
just to try and get their name out there. And honestly, I liked parts of the mix. Like they were aggressive in some parts, like in the guitars, but then the vocals weren't right. But what do you say for that strategy and offering like some free mixes to kind of get your name out there? Because if someone freaking takes it, like you're gonna get hired again. Like if he nailed it, I probably would have hired him for other stuff, right? Like,
Totally. Yeah. I think it's, man, it's a strategy that almost everyone uses. I definitely have used it. I still use it. Like if there's an artist I want to work with, I'm totally happy to do one mix for free and just be like, hey, see what you think. If you like it,
yeah,
then let's talk and we'll figure something out going forward.
yeah,
So yeah, almost everyone does that to get started, because you have to get your word of mouth going, and you also have to get reps, right? Like you just
hmm,
have to have experience working on stuff. And in the early days, that experience is more valuable than any money that you can get paid.
yeah,
So I definitely recommend that, but with a caveat. Like I'd say you want to do that once for a band or an artist, and then probably not again, because I think that artists have to realize too that, this takes work. It takes time to mix something. And so, if someone's offering you something for free, that's great. You can take it, check out their work, but then like don't come back for like the next song and be like, hey, can you also do this one for free? That's because
yeah,
that just is kind of sleazy, right? And from the mixer standpoint, you should also have some level of professionalism where if they like your free mix, then you start talking business, and be like, cool, well, here's my rate. Like, let's talk.
yep. Know your value, man. Know your price.
Yep.
Know your value for sure.
Mhm.
Well, dude, this is so fun, and I could probably talk forever about this stuff. But people can find you out on YouTube if they go to Hardcore Music Studio. You got tons of videos. You got like over 50,000 subscribers on there, and you got tons of stuff on here about mixing and whatnot. How do you say your last name? It's Jordan.
There's some engineers.
Valeriot.
Valeriote. Okay,
Yep.
so Jordan Valeriote, go to Hardcore Music Studio. Just Google him in or go to YouTube. He's got a free metal production guide there and a bunch of stuff where he can help you out and amazing tutorials, guys. But dude, thank you so much for dropping some value bombs on us today.
Yeah, no worries, man. It was good chatting. Thanks, Chris.